Errol Spence versus Terrence Bud Crawford is not a 50-50 split fight, and I'm going to prove it by the numbers. Let's talk.
Oh, Dad. Oh, Dad.
Joshua did not want this fight. He didn't want it for a reason, because Deontay Wilder is the most fiercest puncher in boxing history.
Entitled. You want answers!
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth!
The first thing I want to do is go over the top 10 highest grossing fights in boxing history and what their percentage splits were for the fighters. Number 1, Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pac-Man. That fight grossed $919.74 million. The purse splits was $303.19 million for Floyd Mayweather and $165.5 million for Manny Pacquiao, which is a 65-35 split for Floyd Mayweather. Number 2 was Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor. That fight grossed $898.71 million. Floyd Mayweather again got $303.19 million. Conor McGregor got $94.96 million. That is a 76-24 split for Floyd Mayweather in the second biggest fight in boxing. The third biggest fight in boxing was Floyd Mayweather versus versus Canelo Alvarez. All right, that fight grossed $291.25 million. Floyd Mayweather got $88.18 million. Canelo got $12.21 million. That is an 88-12 split for Floyd Mayweather. All right, number 4 was Floyd Mayweather and Oscar De La Hoya. All right, that fight grossed $253.67 million. Floyd Mayweather, Oscar De La Hoya got $56.98 million, and Floyd Mayweather got $27 million. That is a 68-32 split for Oscar De La Hoya. And I'm going to come back to this fight because this one is very important. All right, it was 68-32. Anyways, let's keep going. The 5th highest grossing fight was Lennox Lewis, the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, undisputed, versus Mike Tyson. That is the 5th highest grossing fight in boxing. All right, that fight grossed $179.88 million. They both did a 50-50 split of the bread at $19.2 million is what they got a piece. But again, they ended up there's reports of Mike Tyson getting $103 million. Lennox didn't get nowhere near that. But there are the reports. I have multiple links of Mike Tyson getting upwards of $100 million for that fight. And Lennox Lewis, you know, their guarantees, whatever. We're just going to stick with that. They got a guaranteed a 50-50 split, but Lennox Lewis was the undisputed champion. Let's keep it pushing. Well, anyways, the reason why we know why Mike got it because Mike's numbers were better. Whatever. Number 6, Evander Holyfield versus Mike Tyson 2, the second one. All right, that's the 6th highest grossing fight in boxing. Holyfield got $38.53 million, and Mike Tyson got $32.96 million, which is a 54-46 split for Holyfield. How is Holyfield getting? Whatever, it doesn't even matter. He should have got a lot more than that, being though that he already beat Mike Tyson. Whatever. The 7th highest grossing fight was Mike Tyson versus Peter McNeely. And that fight grossed a total of $96 million. All All right, 96 million. Mike Tyson got $25 million. Peter McNeely got $540,000. That is a 98-2 split for Mike Tyson. 98-2. All right. Anyways, let's keep going. Number 8, Floyd Mayweather versus Miguel Cotto. That fight grossed $94 million. Floyd Mayweather got $32 million. Cotto got $8 million. That is an 80-20 split for Floyd Mayweather. And Miguel Cotto was the champion. Miguel Cotto was the WBC champion, and he took an 80-20 split against a challenger. Why? Because Floyd's numbers are better. That's why. Let's keep it going. Number 9, Evander Holyfield versus George Foreman. All right. That fight grossed $80 million. Holyfield got $20 million. Foreman got 12.5. That's a 61-39 split for Holyfield. All right. And Holyfield had 3 belts at the time. But the reason why Foreman was able to get such a big split, at 39%, close to 60-40 split with him, is because Foreman numbers were better. He's a bigger draw. As a bigger draw, you need to compensate the bigger draw. Let's keep it going. Number 10, Floyd Mayweather versus Shane Mosley. That's the number 10 highest grossing fight. Number 10. That fight grossed $78.3 million. All right. Floyd Mayweather got $22.5 million. Mosley got 6.7. That is a 77-23 split for Floyd Mayweather. Shane Mosley at this time had fought Oscar De La Hoya twice. Vernon Forrest, he was a no-name, a big name. He was ranked number 3 behind Floyd Mayweather at number 1 and Manny Pacquiao at number 2. Shane Mosley was ranked number 3. And he got 23% of the purse to fight Floyd Mayweather. Why? Because Mayweather's numbers are bigger. That's why. All right. Now, let's do something. I'm going to give y'all 9 notable fights. 9 of them. I'm going to give y'all 9 notable fights that you will know. And I'm going to tell you that purse split. Number 1, Mike Tyson versus Frank Bruno, the rematch, the second one, when Frank Bruno was the WBC champion. Frank Bruno got $6 million. Mike Tyson got $30 million. Why? Because Mike Tyson's numbers are better. That's why. That's why that was an 83-17 split for Mike Tyson, the challenger. Okay. Number 2, Marvelous Marvin Hagler versus Ray Leonard. Marvin Hagler got $20 million. Ray Leonard got 12. The purse split was 67-33 for Hagler. Why? Because Hagler was bigger at the time. He was bigger at that time. Now, you can say maybe that's a debate, BFTB. Maybe Leonard. No, I think Leonard was bigger. Leonard this and Leonard was that, and Leonard was the golden boy and yada yada yada. Yeah, but then Leonard in their negotiations, Leonard agreed to take less because that's the fight that he wanted. He agreed to take less. Keep that in mind. All right, because if that is the fight that Bud Crawford wants, he's not getting a shitty deal. He's getting a good deal because Ray Leonard took 33% to fight Hagler. 33. Errol Spence offered him 40. Keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Sugar Ray Leonard versus the WBC champion Sugar Ray Leonard versus WBA champion Thomas the Hitman Hearns for undisputed. That was for undisputed at the time. Sugar Ray Leonard got 58%. Thomas the Hitman Hearns got 42%. Sugar Ray Leonard made $11 million. Hearns made $8 million. That is a 58-42% split. Let's keep it going. Ray Leonard, the champion, versus Roberto Duran. Big name. Roberto Duran was a big name. He was not a little name, but he was a big name. Had a whole country behind him. Well, Sugar Ray Leonard made 9 million. Roberto Duran made 1.5. That is a 86-14 split for Leonard. 86-14. Oh, in the rematch, Roberto Duran made 8. Leonard made 7. That's 54-46 for Duran. In the rematch, and Duran was the champion. And he made 54%. And fucking Leonard made 46. Don't you think that it, whatever. We'll just keep it pushing. Number 6, Miguel Cotto versus Canelo Alvarez. Miguel Cotto, the WBC middleweight champion, made $5 million. Canelo Alvarez, the challenger, made $15 million. Why is that? Because Canelo's numbers were better. That's why. That's why Canelo's numbers were better. So Miguel Cotto made $5 million. Canelo Alvarez made $15 million. That's a 75-25 split for Canelo Alvarez. And they have both lost to Floyd Mayweather at this time, both of them. And it still was 75-25 for Canelo, the challenger. Why? Because his numbers were better. That's why. Let's keep going. Number 7, Miguel Cotto versus Manny Pac-Man Pacquiao. Cotto got 12 million, Pacquiao got 22 million. That is a 65-35 split for Pacquiao, and Miguel Cotto was the WBO champion. Why? Because Pacquiao's numbers, man. His numbers. That's why. Let's keep it going. Sergey Kovalev versus Canelo Alvarez. Sergey Kovalev got 3 million. Canelo got 35. That is a 92-8 split. And Kovalev was the champion. Kovalev was the champion. Canelo Alvarez was moving up 2 weight classes to fight this man. Kovalev was the champion. Why was the numbers? Why was the split so wide? Because Canelo was the draw. That's why. Canelo's numbers. That's why. Canelo Alvarez versus Caleb Smith. Caleb Smith, the Muhammad Ali winner, the WBA super champion, got $4 million. Canelo Alvarez made 20. That is an 84-16 split for Canelo. Why? Because his numbers are better. That's why. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go back onto something. We're going to go back to the Floyd Mayweather versus Oscar De La Hoya fight. All right? We're going to go back to that one. There was a reason why that split was the way that it was. All right? And they broke this down all the way back then because everybody was saying, why does Floyd deserve so much, is what they were saying back then. Why does Floyd, this is Oscar De La Hoya, this is the golden boy. Why does Floyd deserve so much? So, let's look at the numbers. Oscar De La Hoya's pay-per-view numbers. All right? Against Rafael Rules, he did 333,000 buys, 9.9 million. I'm not going to go through all these numbers because you guys can see it yourself. I'm going to let it scroll through. All right? Gennaro Hernandez, 6 million. Pernell Whitaker, 28. Who else on here? Julio Cesar Chavez, 23. Ike Corte, 25. Trinidad, 71 million. Who else on here? Shane Mosley, 48.4 million. B-Hop, 56 million. And then Ricardo Mayorga, 46 million. Those are the ones that stand out. Again, you can see all the numbers. They're right here. Yeah, I did all the research for you. There's nothing, you don't need to do anything. This is the amount of buys they were, and that's how much money, that's how much overall that fight was. Because, and how this is based on is how many buys it was, how much the fight was, time those together, that gives you your total. Time, however many buys it is, times how much it costs, that gives you your totals. That's where I got all the numbers from. I did all the research for you. You don't need to do anything. There it is. All right. Now, we scroll, if we're looking at how many total buys Oscar De La Hoya did. This is before he fought Floyd Mayweather. How many total buys? He did 10,430,000 total buys. His average pay-per-view buy, Let's just each one, the average amount of people that bought his fights, however many pay-per-views he had, was 614,706. That is the average. His total revenue that's all the fights, that's all the pay-per-view fights he ever had, all combined together, was $490.6 million. This is the big one. The average revenue. That's the big one. Because the average revenue means this is what you're bringing to each fight. This is what I'm bringing to the fight. Whenever I come here, this is my average. I'm bringing this amount with me on my back. That is the number right there. That one. $28.9 million is what Oscar De La Hoya averaged bringing into every fight. Every pay-per-view fight he had, he averaged carrying $28.9 million on his back. All right. Now, let's look at Floyd's numbers at that time. Floyd fought Arturo Gatti on pay-per-view. He fought Zab Judah on pay-per-view, and he fought Carlos Baldomir on pay-per-view. That's it. That's all he had. He had 3 pay-per-views. All right. Of his 3 pay-per-views, Gatti was 369,000. He brought in 16.6. Zab Judah was 378,000. He brought in 17. Carlos Baldomir was 325,000. He brought in 16.2. Right now, if you want to look at the total buys, his total buys, that is 1,072,000. 1,072,000 total buys compared to 10 million buys for Oscar De La Hoya. The average pay-per-view buys was 357,333. That was his average pay-per-view buys. That's his average. That is what he's bringing with him. Every time he comes to a fight, he's bringing in 357,333 people with him. That's what he's bringing. That's how many people is going to buy his fights. His average revenue, the big one, is 16.6 million. That's how much bread he's bringing with him. That's how much money he's carrying on his back. All right. So if you compare the two, because again, this was Floyd Mayweather's, this was his step up pay-per-view fight. This one right here made him the man. This one, Oscar De La Hoya. Again, he had 3 pay-per-views before that, but this one made him the man. Making him the man, he brought with him 357,333 people and 16.6 million. That's what he brought with him. Now, what Oscar De La Hoya brought with him is 614,706 and 28.9 million. Now let's do the numbers. Oscar De La Hoya brought in 614,706 people to each pay-per-view he had. Floyd Mayweather brought in 357,333 people. When you add those together, that gives you the total amount of people that they're bringing in with them. All right, that is 972,039. That's the total. All right, now you take that total and you put in there the bigger number, because the bigger number is going to give you the bigger purse split because they're bringing more bread with them. All right, so you take that, the 614,706. You get the percentage of the total, which is 972,039. And that gives you 63.2388, blah, blah, blah. Roughly 64%. Hence the purse split that Floyd Mayweather versus Oscar De La Hoya got. So, they knew going into negotiations that Oscar De La Hoya was going to get the bigger split. They negotiated, and Oscar was able to squeeze a little bit more out to get at that 68% that he was looking for, to squeeze the juice to get the maximum potential he can get. No problem with that. It was still within the realms of 60-40. Still within the realm of that. Although more of the realm of 70-30, more of 70-30, but still right around in there. But Floyd also knew beating him would make him the man and he'd never be the B-side again, of which he wasn't. Now let's look at Floyd's numbers. Let's look at Errol and Bud using the same thing, the same pattern. Errol Spence has 3 pay-per-views. His last 3 fights were all pay-per-view fights. His last 3, all right? His last 3. So you have Mikey Garcia, you have Sean Porter, and you have Danny Garcia. With Mikey Garcia, he did 360,000 buys. At $75 is $27 million. If against Sean Porter, he did 350,000 buys. At $75 is 0.25 million. Against Danny Garcia, he did 300,000 at $75 is 22.5 million. Total pay-per-view buys 1,010,000. His average pay-per-view buys, the average amount of people that is coming with him, whenever he has a fight, this is his average, 336,667, which is about the same as Floyd's. You know, Floyd had 357,333 average. Errol has 336,666 average. So they're roughly bringing in around the same amount of people at this time in their career. Both of them with 3 pay-per-view fights. Floyd and Errol with 3 pay-per-view fights are averaging just about the same amount of people. And there was no pandemic with Floyd Mayweather. No pandemic. None. Whatever. Total revenue is $75.75 million. That is what he is bringing in. Now, again, the money, the pay-per-views didn't cost as much then as they do now. But still, that's what he's averaging bringing in. All right, 75.75. That's a total. I'm sorry, 75.75 million is what he has brought in total revenue. His average is 25.25. That's his average. All right. The total revenue that he's brought in so far with 3 pay-per-views, the same as Floyd Mayweather having 3 pay-per-views. He's brought in almost the same amount of pay-per-view buys, almost the same amount of average of pay-per-view buys. His total revenue is bigger, of course, because the pay-per-views cost more, and his average revenue is bigger again because the pay-per-views cost more. But Errol Spence and Floyd Mayweather with 3 pay-per-views are right around the same thing. FYI. Now let's look at Terrence Bud Crawford's. He has 2 pay-per-views, and they're not his last 2. They're not. His first one was a failure. He did 50,000 pay-per-views at $50 a piece. So it was $25 cheaper than Errol Spence's pay-per-views, and only 50,000 people bought it, which gives you a total of $2.5 million. Amir Khan at $70 was he did 150,000 pay-per-view buys against Amir Khan, which brought in $10.5 million. So his total pay-per-views, his total pay-per-view buys was 200,000. His average pay-per-view buys was 100,000. His total revenue is 13 million. His average revenue is 6 million. So let's just do the math, why don't we? So, using the exact same formula from Oscar De La Hoya and Floyd Mayweather. You take what they're bringing with them. You take whatever they're bringing with them on their back, however many people are coming with them. 336,667 people are coming, that's on an average, they're coming with Errol Spence Jr. to every one of his pay-per-views. On average, 100,000 people are coming with Bud Crawford to both of his pay-per-views, on average. All right, so if you add those 2 together to see what the total amount of people who are going to come to this fight, total amount of people who are going to buy this fight, all right, that's 436,667 people total. That's the average what's coming. Now, if you take that average and you put in Errol Spence, what he's bringing in to figure out who's getting what, the numbers tell you that Errol's getting a bigger split, but how much bigger? Now, when you put that in, Errol Spence is bringing 77% of the people he is bringing 77% of the purse. 77%, and he offered this man 60-40. So he downed himself. He downed himself 17%. So if the man says 70-30, he's downing himself 7% because he's bringing 77% of the people to this fight. He is the A side, and it's not even close. He's bringing 77% of the people. They are coming to this fight. They are watching this fight. 77% of the people who buy this fight are buying this fight for Errol Spence. So how can Terrence Bud Crawford expect to ask for 50-50 or, for God's sake, 60-40 in his favor? How can he do that? I don't give a fuck what accolades you have. I don't care. What matters is what you're bringing to the table. And the numbers don't lie. So for everybody telling me, oh man, he should get 50-50, this fight is 50-50. Well, I gave you all the top fights. I gave you all of them. The notable fights that you got, back in the old days. Canelo Alvarez has not did a 50-50 fight, period. At all. Why? Because his numbers say so. His numbers. Floyd Mayweather has never did a 50-50 fight. Why? Because his numbers say so. When he was the B side, he took B side bread. As the A side, he takes A side bread. Don't tell me about accolades, because Manny Pacquiao is the only 8-division champion in boxing history. And he was the B side. And he took B side bread. So don't tell me about accolades, because Terrence Bud Crawford's accolades don't come close to Manny Pacquiao's. And Floyd, Errol is not Floyd and Bud isn't Pacquiao. You are correct. Then don't talk to me about accolades then. Then don't bring up accolades. Don't. Because if you're saying, Bud's accolades are better than EJ's, Pacquiao's accolades are better than Floyd's. So then don't talk to me about accolades. If you don't want to bring up Pacquiao, if you don't want to say Floyd and Pacquiao are not Errol and Bud, then don't bring up accolades. Because Pacquiao's accolades, it's arguably the best in all of boxing. Matter of fact, that is a debate that you can have, because there's only one 8-division champion in all of boxing, and that is Manny Pacquiao. Whose accolades are better, if that's the excuse you want to use? No, numbers. Numbers, and they will never lie. Men lie, women lie. Numbers will never lie, because they are what they are.
But they are who we thought they were, and we let them off the hook.
This is no 50-50 fight. Errol Spence is doing Bud Crawford a favor by offering him 60-40. 70-30 is a good deal, especially when Errol is bringing in 77%. 77% of the people that will buy this fight, Errol is bringing them in. The numbers don't lie. Now tell me again why Bud deserves 50-50. BFTB. Shout out to the LDBC. And I'm out.